What what are those benefits, you might ask? Oh gosh. Well, we understand something about total surrender. We start to understand that this is an all or nothing kind of deal. As the big book says, God is either everything or he's nothing. We come to understand that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We have a lot of support around us. People who've walked ahead of us. We have a forum. We have teachers and relationships with other people also on a path. And there's drawbacks, right? There's drawbacks to AA, NA, all the 12-step groups as well. There's in AA, right, we have kind of two books. there's the book, the big book, written in this time period, following on the heels of a sort of massive spiritual experience. And then there's this other book, the 12 and 12, written after the pink cloud has crumbled in a period of deep, deep depression for the author. And it's a much, much more sobering kind of perspective reading the 12 and 12. It's like, whoa, this is the same guy. And it kind of waffles a lot. It's like, well, it could be this way, it could be that way. There's a lot of hedging in the 12 and 12. There's just a lot more life experience. And it's hard to say, what came of Bill Wilson, if he sort of made it through the other side, I don't know. And we're kind of given this this set of tools in AA. And they're pretty great tools. And there's other tools out there which are also great. And maybe what AA, in its singleness of purpose, in a lot of 12-step groups, that's a real key idea. Their singleness of purpose is helping others to recover. And so they don't always have a lot to say about the journey afterwards. They don't always have a lot to say about feelings. And they don't have a lot to say about where it's all headed. And at the same time, there's a really key core, I consider it the practice, tucked into the big book. And the practice is when we find ourselves disturbed, we sit quietly in prayer and meditation. And this is the practice, the practice. It is in a sort of ultimate sense, it is what we can do. And I think it's helpful to also know the why of it. And the why is when we allow ourselves to sit quietly when we are disturbed. Why are we disturbed? We're disturbed because something's coming up. Life is presenting us with something, maybe on the outside, it's seemingly. And the fact that we are disturbed always means that there's something inside to see, maybe to learn, maybe to just experience. And in a broad sense, there's kind of two maybe three forms of what arises. The easiest, maybe the simplest, is old stuff. It's just that old pain, maybe, that got buried. We couldn't be fully conscious of it at the time, and it got buried. That sadness, we didn't have space in our consciousness, in our life to handle, got buried. That fear we couldn't experience fully, got buried. And as we open into our heart center, this old stuff comes up. Maybe we weren't allowed to feel anger, and it got buried. Maybe, who? There's a few, but shame. Who likes to feel shame? Got buried. And so this stuff comes up. If we don't get hooked into it, start believing some story. I'm not allowed to feel angry. Why should I feel angry? There's nothing happening that I should be angry about. Therefore, I'm not allowed to feel anger. Right? As long as we don't do that, we stay with the feeling. This old material can come up and pass through. So that would be category one. We'll call that old stuff. Just old stuff, couldn't handle at the time, got buried. Just wants to pass through our system. Let me start to get the hang of that. And then stuff that's a little bit trickier starts to come through. That feeling that keeps getting recycled through the system. Doesn't really pass through. What's happening there? It's getting generated. It's getting regenerated. Recycled through the system. And the reason something does this is because somewhere, sometime, we formed a belief. A belief that wasn't true. And that belief keeps that cycle in place and going. And it's been doing this long enough that it seems to be true, right? We believe the story because it seems to be true. It keeps happening, keeps getting played out in our lives. So it's kind of self-affirming, self-fulfilling in that sense. So I'll give you a very simple core belief of mine. The belief was, I hurt women. Took a while for me to get it boiled down to its essence. Very, very core belief that I picked up in life. And then made true. It kept repeating, kept playing itself out. And I would go, see? There it is, it's true. This is true about me. It seems unavoidable. And I could get into the details a little bit of why I have this belief. I formed it very young. It seemed like when I was really authentic as a child, that it was painful to my mother. So I formed this belief, and I played it out. Over and over in relationship. Even after I started to learn some tools. Even after I started to work through some of the fears that kept me from communicating, being really honest. One of the core sort of parts of that belief, the formation of that belief, was around, as a child, not knowing that there was a difference between pain and suffering. And that me being honest might be painful in the moment. but it wasn't going to cause suffering. And so, by trying to avoid pain and suffering, inevitably, I always produced suffering and more pain. So this is category 2. Old material that gets recycled in our lives because it's held in place. We have a belief somewhere. It keeps us in a loop with our feelings and experience and creating the same situations in our lives. And the other primary reason we can be disturbed, we'll call this category projections. What is a projection? Projections are when we take ourselves, usually something we don't want to see about ourselves, and we see it instead outside of us, out in the world. And if you're a 12-step person, you probably already have some insight into this process. Right? A 4th step, we list our resentments. And then in the big book, it asks us to look at the person, look at the situation, ask ourselves if we've done something similar, and to treat the other person as we would treat ourselves. This is a sick person. How can I be of service to them? A sick person like me, right? So it's an introduction to projections. And there's been a lot of great work on projection since the big book was written. And projection is very, very key to this whole thing. So where we're going is to experience being the all. And the all means all. I am the same stuff as you and everything I see. And of course, along the way, we've created all kinds of ideas about how the world is and how the world should be, and all kinds of things. There's all kinds of things in the world that we don't want to be. I just want to be the nice stuff in the world. Saints and, holy people, they're great. Murderers, I don't want to be a murderer. I don't want to be whatever it is I consider bad. I don't want to be, I don't want to be a child molester. I don't want to be there's so many terrible, sad things in the world, right? And so rather than owning that something of what the other person is expressing lives in us, right? I haven't murdered anyone to my knowledge, physically, but I have absolutely engaged in murder in my mind, right? All kinds of authoritarianism lives in my mind. All the seeds of what we could call evil, they're all in here. Just like all the good stuff's in here too. And so it can be hard to let in the bad stuff, and it can be hard to let in the good stuff. And you can be sure that if you're struggling interpersonally, that there's some projection in there. Something, and it's usually quite straightforward, right? Well, this person does X, and doing X just makes my blood boil. And it's really just as simple as going, oh yeah, I do X. And then I like breathing breathing that thing back in. Oh yeah, it's not it's not really that upsetting that they're doing this thing. What's really upsetting me is that I do that and I can't see it and I'm not taking ownership of it. And so anytime I dispossess myself in that way, anytime I make myself smaller than I am, or bigger than I am, I will feel uncomfortable. I will feel dis-ease. So these are the three main categories of what comes up. And at times it is truly, truly astounding how much we've buried. And how slow this process can seemingly go at times. I didn't have a lot of guides along the way for some of this work. And maybe some of it could have gone a little faster if I did. Maybe. Right, I mean, I remember really starting to tackle my love avoidance, which is, a modern term, modern psychological term, from, it's got various origins, but seemed like a lot. Waking up off and on for almost a year, just about in a cold sweat. Like literally sweating. I was feeling so much fear. And some of that was because I didn't really know quite what I was working with, quite what I was doing. I hadn't fully taken ownership of the problem, in a sense. I hadn't fully owned that I have this thing. And I was still projecting some of it outside of me. Oh, is this the relationship I want to be in? And blah, blah, blah. And maybe, maybe I should just go somewhere else. Do something else. I'm still playing with that projection. And fear. As if it had something important to tell me. As if it wasn't just another lesson coming down the pike. So yeah, old stuff. Old stuff? Old stuff with a twist. Beliefs, yeah. And projections. There's a few other little things that are lovely, icing on the cake. But this is the cake. These three sort of categories, they make up the cake of what it is that keeps us from experiencing ourselves in a really full, complete, awake way.